Alright, so here's your instructions for the pull the engine out the top lab. It may be a Camry or it may be a Corolla. Either way, they're going to be kind of similar. A couple little details to point out. When you go to pull the engine, at least for sure on a Camry, this axle has this bracket on it, and that's going to have to come off. You won't just be able to unbolt it, you will have to slide it out of the transaxle a little bit. You know, there's kind of a separate video on that. This group did a fast job, but they were kind of sloppy. You can see they pulled apart the suspension and they've really got this axle flopped over. That's definitely going to be damaging that inner joint. So we could do better than this. But if, like, essentially, you're going to have to figure out exactly how you're going to take the axle out. I would personally probably disconnect the lower ball joint, flip it up, pull the axle out of that end. You could even undo it here, and that way you can take the axle clean out. This is a little too tight, so that could be damaging our flex hose for the brake caliper. You know, try to do a little better than this, but at least you're getting an idea. You will need to move that axle out of the transaxle. Additionally, when you go to pull the engine, because this is an automatic transmission, we've got bolts coming through the flex plate, and those bolts go into the torque converter, 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a circle here. Basically, you'll go under and you'll access the torque converter by removing a cover. That cover is right here. You can see that square hole where you can see the flex plate, and there's one hole. Now you can't quite see a hole. So you'll be popping the cover off, undoing the 6 bolts. When all 6 bolts are out, you're gonna shove this torque converter in towards the transmission, because we gotta get this hub to clear. If you don't do that, it'll get kind of hung up, and you may pull the torque converter off with it, in which case you can damage the seal, and you can also damage the drive gear for the transmission oil pump. That's a big mess. That's happened before. You know, you may have to deal with the starter depending on the particular engine. In this case, I think they actually could have left it. They pulled it out. It's all good. You got the standard stuff on top. In this one, you won't just necessarily unhook it from the ECM, although in their case they did. You can do it a few ways. You can pull most of this harness off, but where you'll get hung up, this comes around. You'll have quite a few of these to do, and you can pull it off with no harness. Or, you know, I'm okay if you want to disconnect it from the ECM and in a few spots, you know, and pull it down with the harness. Either way is okay. But if you were to do engine replacement, you need to swap all these over to your new engine. Also, when you're doing the job, you'll need to support the transaxle. So you can see they got a floor jack on there. If you didn't have that, the second you pull them apart, this transaxle is going to fall in, and that's going to be a no-go. So you may have to manipulate the transaxle up a little, down a little, you know, try to get them separate. As you're trying to separate them, you'll notice they are going to get hung where there's dowel pins. So this is where the dowel pin goes into the transaxle case, and the dowel pin is actually driven in the engine block. So that dowel pin right there, and that dowel pin right there. You know, we will have to separate these substantially to make sure those are clear. Once you can see some space and you can see it's moving, you're ready to start lifting it. And speaking of lifting it, you'll have to use either the cherry picker, aka engine hoist, or if that's tied up, you may actually use the hoist that's in here. But this would mainly be for a Corolla, because on a Corolla we don't have to take the suspension apart to pull that axle out. You could use this. So we'll hook a chain through here, and here are the controls. By the way, just for a show, we can slide this. Okay, and you'll get it all lined up, and then basically up is up, down is down. So you could use that, or that cherry picker. And then what I like, this equalizing engine lift support is really nice. It basically hooks to the picker, and then you have a couple brackets. You know, you'll at minimum need to do corner to corner, but Sometimes even nicer to do all 4. And then if you want to tip the engine, you can actually just turn this right here, and you'll see if I do it long enough, it's leveling the engine or it's tilting the engine depending on what I'm trying to do. And so, you know, that's pretty good. Be careful of your radiator clearance. So this group chose to pull the fan shroud, which is good. Other groups sometimes choose to pull the whole radiator condenser and everything as an assembly. You'll probably need to pull the wiper cowl, but on some vehicles you can sneak it out. Some people prefer to pull the hood. If you do pull the hood, you'll need to put fender covers on the roof and pull the hood and lay it down on the fender covers. And then when you put it back on, you're going to need to have made some marks on those bolts and make sure that your fender gaps end up equal. We can't be having body scratches and marks and things. And so on installation, we're going to swing it back in. There's a couple little technical aspects on, you know, some tips on how to get it lined up to the engine, but basically you're going to try to get it drawn onto the dowels and then pull it in with some bolts, make sure everything is lined up, and then kind of reverse of removal. The torque converter is a little tricky. We'll do a little video on that, but normally we will start all 6 bolts by hand, you know, as much as we can, and then torque all 6 bolts. If you start torquing them one at a time, you may get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th bolt and it may not line up anymore. Now, if you follow TIS points out there may be one special bolt that's kind of tapered, and it may be the first one to install. That's not exactly how I do it, but if you follow TIS, they'll call out one particular bolt. So you can follow that too. So this is just a brief overview. We'll do some more tips and tricks, but that's basically your engine out the top instructions.